Mark Rogers TV back with you, talking Utah Utes football with Shane Roberts of Block U on the SB Nation platform. Hey, Shane, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Mark. I'm excited.
Yeah, this is good stuff. Trying to kind of fill the gap. It's just a long off season for college football fans, longer than any season in major sports. So we're talking football, of course, with Utah coming off a 5-7 season, 2-7 in the Pac-12, and as you can imagine, Shane, from outside the conference, the real notice was given to Utah football after that Stanford victory, when everybody kind of took notice and said, how good is this Utah football team? It seemed to be kind of an aberration, but at the same time, a big night in defeating the Cardinal at home. Looking at this team coming out of spring practice, it starts at quarterback. We usually start there. That's the guy that has the target on his back. In regards to credit and attention, you got Travis Wilson, who missed the last 3 games of the season, put up some spotty numbers. I know he had the 6-pick game against UCLA, 16 touchdowns, 16 interceptions, 56% passer. Again, missed the last 3 games. Adam Schultz got plenty of playing time down the stretch at 48%, 6 touchdowns and 5 picks. You bring in the transfer from Oklahoma, Kendall Thompson. So your thoughts about the quarterback position and how much of it right now is Travis Wilson's, and what's the thoughts about possibly some competitors there?
Well, it's definitely Travis Wilson's job to lose. His statistics from last year are a little bit misleading, just because obviously he had pass protection issues on the offensive line. He actually, the first 6 games of the season, he started out 4-2, and yeah, they beat Stanford on a great game. But basically, he just got absolutely destroyed in that Stanford game. The game plan was fantastic, but what happened in that game is his hand actually got sprained, and it was actually got a pretty gnarly cut on it. And going up against Arizona, he definitely wasn't 100%. Later on in the season, he actually got a concussion against Arizona State, and then when he got that concussion, he got that CAT scan. It came out to show that he had some kind of intercranial artery injury that's been with him for a while. So they were kind of concerned that it's a life-threatening injury. If he took a wrong hit, basically it could be lights out for Travis. He got cleared right before spring practice for non-contact drills, but he's yet to be cleared for full contact. So he's not out of the woods yet. So we still have to wait until, they say, about July, until we hear if Travis is 100% good to go on the season. I can definitely see outside of the Utah circles, looking at the record and looking at Travis's stats, that there would be a concern in terms of having him at quarterback. But like I said, he started the season 4-2. They were actually about 2 plays away from actually starting 6-0. They had Oregon State on the ropes. They actually had Oregon State down to a 4th down and about 15, with about 30 seconds left in the 4th quarter that Oregon State had to convert. Brandon Cooks, as everybody knows, actually lit up the Utes like crazy that night. And then they actually dropped an interception in the end zone that could have sealed that game off as well. Against UCLA, yeah, Travis had 6 interceptions, but I would actually attribute 4 of those to wide receivers tipping up the ball. The wide receivers were probably largely responsible for many of those interceptions that Travis Wilson had last year, just not be able to, frankly, catch the ball. So against UCLA, even though he had 6 interceptions, they still were down to about the 10-yard line going in before that 6th one happened to seal the game. And I can almost guarantee Utah would have went for 2 if they would have scored there. And there was even a questionable touchdown that wasn't called because they said Jake Murphy didn't actually have possession in the end zone that would have brought this the score to within a point after. So Travis is definitely the starter going into the season, but he needs to be cleared. The question is, where's his confidence level at? Is he, because you got to figure, if a guy's got a brain injury, how's he going to react to that, especially with an offensive line that's in flux? As you mentioned, there is definitely competition there. Adam Schultz, in my opinion, he's going to be the odd man out by far. I'd be surprised if he's on campus come fall. The depth at quarterback is actually really good. You mentioned Kendall Thompson coming in out of Oklahoma. He should be here within the next couple of weeks. He's definitely a Dave Christensen guy that Christensen recruited when Christensen was at Wyoming, and I think he knew about him also when Christensen was at Mizzou. But I'm not sure about him because he hasn't shown. He needs to get on campus to show us anything before he can actually compete for the starting quarterback position. This is the Pac-12 conference. I mean, this is the conference of quarterbacks. The name that a lot of people need to keep an eye out for, the guy that, in my opinion, is going to challenge Travis Wilson, and if Travis is not the starter unless Kendall comes in and wows everybody, will be Connor Manning. Connor Manning is going to be a redshirt freshman. They've been salivating over this kid. He broke all of Matt Barkley's records in Southern California in high school. So he's out of Southern California, Orange County. The kid is a pure quarterback. He can throw it with the best of them. He's not the tallest guy. I kind of compare him to kind of a Drew Brees type. Very short, but he's accurate. He gets the ball out quickly, and he's a surgeon. So there's a lot of excitement behind that kid. And then there's also another one, Brandon Cox, which was actually a Rich Rodriguez commit at Arizona that decommitted last second and came to Utah. He'll be competing for probably that third position on the depth chart. But that kid has great dual threat capability and a very pretty throw. His problem just right now is consistency. So definitely right now it's Travis #1 going into the season. He needs to hold off everybody else. But a lot of people can't forget that he was an elite 11 quarterback. So he was a very highly sought-after recruit. And he showed a lot of promise last year. It's just, can he come back from the injuries and maintain consistency throughout and get support, to be frank. He needs help.
All right. Shane, thanks for the insight on the quarterback stats, because that's why we bring you guys on. You bring some perspective on what really happened. I remember tuning into that UCLA game, like you say, it was back and forth, and you had a chance at the end. I think there was a penalty and a sack, and you were in a desperation situation late in that game, like a 4th and long, and when a quarterback's in that situation, he almost got sacked, and of course you got to just chuck it up and hope for the best.
Don't forget, UCLA had Anthony Barr, which was one of the top draft picks this last season. I want to say number 9. That guy was just an absolute freak. And our left tackle at the time, which is going in as the starting left tackle into this coming season, he had a hard time dealing with the speed around the edge with Anthony Barr, and that caused a ton of problems for Travis Wilson.
Well, let's get to that next, Shane. You talk about the pass protection issues contributing to a lot of interceptions, like right off the top with Wilson and Schultz, 21 picks. Right there, any hopes that the pass protection issues will be resolved, and what's the offensive line look like right now?
There is a lot of hope in terms of that. They fired the former offensive line coach, Dan Finn. They did not retain him, as they like to say in a very politically correct fashion. They brought in a new offensive line coach, Jim Harding, with Dave Christensen from Wyoming. The early returns on him are very, very positive, very different kind of coach. Finn was much more in your face. Sources say he rubbed some guys the wrong way, where Harding's much more of a teacher, and he's doing a very good job. The thing with the Utah offensive line has been experience, and that's probably really the whole team across the board. There's not a lot of upperclassmen. There's a lot of bodies at offensive line. 2 recruiting classes ago, they brought in probably about a dozen offensive linemen. Many of them redshirted last year. JT Patasi, he's the guy that was playing left tackle last year. He has a ton of talent, and he actually has lost about 25 pounds going to this next season, and he's gotten a lot quicker and a lot faster. A lot of people were wondering if he might move inside, but he's staying outside, at least going into fall. They have a lot of names there at the offensive line with Iono at center. You got, let me pull up the name here real quick. I'm spacing on it. Isaac Asiata at the right guard. So there's a lot of young talent there, but they just need to find the right combination, and that's what they were working with a lot in spring, is trying to find the right mix and match of guys. Hopefully, if that's not resolved within the first couple of weeks of fall camp, then there's definitely a concern there, because those guys, especially the left side, the right side was solid. The left side last year was a swinging gate, and Travis Wilson never had a chance.
All right. Yeah, the offensive line, not just getting the right guys, but as you well know, getting the right chemistry, the right combination of guys, and you see guys moving from all different positions along the line. So I'm sure a lot of that's going to happen in August. Let's move to the wide receivers. You got Dres Anderson, 1,000 yards, 53 receptions. You do lose some depth if you look at just strictly pass catchers from A to Z along the stats line. But you got sophomore Dominique Hatfield. I understand a lot's possibly expected of him.
Hatfield, he's been kind of floating under the radar. Had a very good spring game, especially with Dres not playing in the spring game. The name a lot of people forget that we lost in the first game last year against Utah State is Kenneth Scott. Kenneth Scott, in my opinion, might be the most talented wide receiver on the team in terms of just speed, size. He's pretty prototypical. He's about 6'3", 220 pounds. The kid can catch anything. We have an article up on our website right now, blocku.com, saying he's basically an X factor going into next year because the kid, he will be in the NFL. He's an NFL-type wide receiver. Dres is going to be your number one. He's just an absolute burner. He runs a 4.3 40 very easily. He's son of Flipper Anderson. If anybody knows that name, he holds the NFL record for receptions. Last season, as you mentioned, there's some loss in depth. It wasn't the best of depth, though. That's the thing. Anthony Denham, he's been picked up by the Houston Texans as a unsigned free agent. He's going in as a tight end. We had him as a slot receiver last year. He's just a big dude. He's not the best at getting separation, especially against Pac-12 BCS level athletes. Sean Fitzgerald, he moved over once Kenneth Scott went down. So they were dealing with a lot of patchwork at wide receiver. This year, hopefully everybody stays healthy. You'll have Dres on one end, Kenneth Scott on the other end. That could possibly be one of the best wide receiving tandems in the Pac-12. And they're also bringing in a guy named Kalen Clay. He's a JC transfer. He's a 1 year to play one guy. This kid runs. He might be the fastest kid that's ever stepped on Utah's campus, is what we're hearing. And just for reference, we've had a couple guys clock at pro days at 4.2 40s, 4.1 40s. And this guy might be the fastest seen out of any of them. So there's some promise at wide receiver. The key is they need to stay healthy. A lot of youth there. Delshawn McClellan's very promising young kid. And just like I've mentioned, a lot of youth. Dres Anderson's the only upperclassman in terms of a senior. Everybody else is juniors and younger. So they really need to develop and cultivate that depth. And it seems like they're pulling in a lot of that. They've hit Florida. They've hit Louisiana in recruiting. They're bringing a lot of bodies. I'm thinking a lot of people don't realize is this is Utah's probably first year with nothing but Pac-12 level recruits. This last season was the last year of what would have been considered our Mountain West recruits. A lot of those seniors, we might have some guys coming back from LDS missions that will probably maybe skew that a little bit, but this is basically a whole Pac-12 roster now, but it's still just a whole bunch of young guys, including the wide receiving core.
All right, Shane, love the Flipper Anderson reference. Yeah, UCLA, St. Louis, not St. Louis Rams, Los Angeles Rams. It's been that long ago. Yeah, I think that was a Sunday night game against the New Orleans Saints, if I remember correctly, like 339 yards, and didn't have a great NFL career, but for that one night, he was the best on the planet. Let's look at the defense for Utah. Trevor Riley, exceptional season, 8 sacks, 16 tackles for loss. He gets drafted. Keith McGill at corner. Saw a lot of tape on him leading up to the draft when I was looking at prospects. He could really close on the football. 13 passes defensed. So 2 draftees gone, some other talent gone, but at the same time, seems as though you've got quite a bit coming back. Your assessment going through the defense and all 3 layers?
Well, when it comes to Utah football, when you have Coach Kyle Whittingham at the head, it starts with defense. Utah's been traditionally one of the better defensive units in the country, not just the conference. They've actually put the most corners in the NFL in the last about decade, the most Utes, including Eric Weddle, which was, before this last week, the highest paid safety in the NFL, and he's just a constant all-pro. So not a lot of concern with defense. There's a few question marks, at least in terms of my regard, my thoughts. The front 4, Utah's been putting a lot of those guys in the NFL. Nate Orchard returns on the defensive line at the end. He is your prototypical speed rusher. He gave Stanford nightmares last year. They could not contain him. He had 2 strip sacks in that game, and he was just all over the field. So he has a ton of promise. The rest of the defensive line, they like to kind of consider is reloading. There's a lot of young guys coming in there. I'm not that concerned about D-line just because that's kind of what Utah does. They churn out D-line. Linebacker is a big concern just because of injuries. Jacoby Hale, we kind of always joke around on our website and amongst our guys that they need to put him in bubble wrap and freeze him in between games just because he's injured so often. Last year, I want to say it was a hamstring injury that was causing him concern. This spring, he actually tore his ACL. We're kind of not sure when we might see Hale come back, but he is the perfect edge rusher. He just has a nose for the quarterback. He's just great at that. The name a lot of people need to be aware of, though, is Gianni Paul. He was a transfer out of the University of Miami. He actually led the Hurricanes in tackles his sophomore year. We were hoping we could get him on campus last season, but the ruling from Miami came down as soft as it did, and he wasn't able to play immediately. So last year he redshirted. Now he's a junior. This is the kind of guy that's rallying the team, unlike somebody I've seen in a long time. If he can stay healthy, he's a program-defining player. He injured his foot in spring ball. Actually had a Liz Frank injury, so he had to have surgery. They're anticipating he may be out 3 or 4 weeks into the season. But if he comes back healthy, he will be the heart and soul of this defense. The kid is a tackling machine, and he gets in scrums with the quarterback. I mean, he was getting in Travis Wilson's face this in spring practice, so he's rallying everybody to the cause. There's Kyle Whittingham's nephew, Jason Whittingham. He is again another tackling machine. He does a great job. He kind of came out of nowhere from the middle to the last half of the season last year. He's done a great job. And then we kind of have a flex player, and we'll also talk about him at safety as well, is Brian Blecken. Brian Blecken was a freshman All-American out of California his freshman year back in 2010. Last year he had to sit out in a red shirt because he had chronic knee issues in terms of tendonitis and the like. So he sat out last year, but he is now coming back this year, and he is a ball-hawking, slobber-knocking, traditional, I'm going to take your head off type of strong safety, but he's also big enough to where he can play linebacker, so he's interchangeable. The key is just all these guys have to get healthy before the beginning of the season and going forward. And there's a lot of young guys as well that have redshirted and stuff like that, but we won't know all about them really until the fall comes around.
Wow, it sounds like you've got some pieces in place there. If you can keep them healthy, like you say, figure out the offensive line and protect your quarterback, Travis Wilson. We're joined by Shane Roberts of Block U. It's the Utah platform on SB Nation. Shane, before we let you go, if you can let some people know what you're working on right now, football related.
Well, we're working on just a whole bunch of preview stuff. I have up there right now the most indispensable player for Utah football, Devontae Booker. Kenneth Scott being our X Factor, and then coming soon, I'm currently working on expectations going into 2014, coming out of spring ball, to give people an idea of what to hopefully look forward to this coming season.
All right, Shane, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate the information and the insight.
Thanks, Mark. It was a lot of fun.